Alright guys, so this is a mountain goat leg. I had to run some tests beforehand, so you can see I've cut some patches off of there. But look at this stuff. This is unreal. I would have never thought that something would have so much consistency like bucktail. I don't know if it's hollow. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I do know that like when I tie it down, it flares. There's some really cool stuff that goes on there. So we're gonna go ahead and tie up a fly with this right now. I think I'm gonna do like a wiggle tail goat hair Buford. We'll see what happens. Before we tie this up though, I realized I used all my dubbing brushes up in white, so I'm gonna have to spin up a dubbing brush. Let's do that real quick. Alright guys, so this is what we're going to start out with. I picked these hooks up from Tight Lines the other day. These are Umpqua series hooks. This is a 4/0 hook. I'll let you see that. That's a 4/0 hook right there. Pretty good hook gap. And I'm going to be using some GSP for my thread. That's what I always use on my flies. There's no real pretty way to do this. I'm just wrapping this up. I'm going to go back to about where the barb is, right there, and just put a thread base down. Nothing pretty here. I'm just going to try to rip through this for you guys. I'm going to show you something else, though, about wiggle tails and hooks. Or, sorry, not hooks, but shanks. So let me grab something here real quick. All right. If you notice what I have here, I have a whole bunch of wire. There's two different thicknesses here. And what I'm going to reach for first is the thinner of the two. So this diameter is thinner than the other diameter that I'm going to use for my articulated shank. The reason for this thinner stuff is because I can mold it and bend it a little bit more, because it's going to stick off the back of here to hold a wiggle tail that I'm going to put on. And because good catch. Because this stuff is a little bit more pliable, it's a little bit more loose, when you have this wire that sticks off the back of here with a wiggle tail attached to it, this is not going to become a lever or a point that when a fish gets hooked here, that it's going to be able to get out. It's not going to be able to, like, you know, this bends enough that it's not going to be able to use it as a lever to become unhooked in the grand scheme of things. So there's that wiggle tail that I've got on the back of this fly that we're going to tie here real quick. So let me continue getting materials out. So I'll pull out one of these wiggle tails. I'm going to show you what I do. I have this tool. It's a twist tech. That right there, a twist tech. This is supposed to be drilled into a piece of wood or something, and you can use it for all kinds of really cool stuff. But if you want to get down on this, this is what we're going to do. Alright, so we're going to bend this piece of metal here, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this wiggle tail, we're going to slide this wiggle tail right onto this piece of metal. This wire. Piece of metal. It's not a piece of metal, it's a wire. I don't know what I'm talking about. Alright, so then this loop is used on this other part of the mechanism here. The wire slides through, this locks in, and basically this just gets twisted up. This is a really, really cool piece of equipment. Alright, so now this is what we have. Just like that. So that's a piece of wire right there with our wiggle tail on it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bend it one more time. We're going to look at the shank of the hook. We're going to see where we want it to go. Maybe we want it to go about right there. So we're going to put a bend in that hook right there. Bend it. Boom. Done. That's going to go through. We're laying it right on top of there. And we're going to tie that in. just like that. So, make sure that's bent properly. Sweet. Tie that in. As you can see, there's a little bit of a bulge on the end of that. I'm not going to tie all the way to the eye of this hook. The reason why I'm not going to tie all the way to the eye of that hook is if you guys watch other videos that I have, I usually take about, you know, not quite a 1/4 inch, maybe a 1/4 inch, and I stop about right there, where almost probably where my thread is about right now. I stop there and I leave that part of the hook bare. The reason why I do that is because I believe that if you don't crowd that hook with all kinds of materials on the back end of that thing, you're giving it more room to articulate in the water. That's what I believe. You don't have to. That's fine. All right, I need my mountain goat leg. Boom. All right, so check this out. Normally we'd be using bucktail. Normally we'd be using bucktail for our tail, but look at these fibers. Look at how long these are. These are crazy. Stupid long fibers right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a decent amount of those, just like I would my bucktail for a tail on any kind of big musky or pike streamer. Clip that off of there. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to comb out all the guard hairs on this, hanging onto the tips. Look at that. Oh, there's tons of guard hairs hanging out in there. But this is so much like bucktail. Like if I told you that that was bucktail, you'd believe me. You'd totally believe me that that was bucktail. Laying this in on the back end, right here. Gonna tie that in. Look at, I can even flare it like bucktail if I want to. I don't want to because I don't want this tail to flare. But I can pull that back and flare it just like bucktail. This stuff is super cool. I've really, really, really liked working with this stuff so far. I've only got about 4 or 5 flies tied with it, but so far, I really dig it. So, there's that, just coming up, tying all that down. I'm flying through this video for you guys, but there. So that's our tail with the wiggle tail sticking out the back, pulling that right back, just like that. All right, next thing. Schlopping. Alright, gonna grab and put some long tails on the back of this thing. Alright, should have prepped my materials. I always say that when I do these videos. Should have prepped my materials. Should have prepped my materials. I didn't. We're doing it anyways. Here we go. Tying this in. Boom. I don't want to go quite as far back as the wiggle tail. I still want to give that some room to move. In the back there. Take this one. Laying it on the other side. Symmetrically. Just like that. Make sure they're going to come back to the same place. Boom. Wrapping that up. That's our fly so far, just like that. Alright, now we grab the dubbing brush that we tied up just a second ago, and we're going to wrap this thing in pretty easily. Wrapping that thing in here. Oh, wait, before I do that, glue. I'm going to cement that down. Oh, and, no, here we go. There's some glue. Put that right down there, some head cement. Wrap that down. Get that tied up in there. We don't need any crazy teeth tearing this thing apart. Alright. If it seems like I'm leaning forward to tie this fly, I am. I was trying to get the right camera angle. So, get this tied in here. Like I said, we're only going to go to about there. All right. Preening all this stuff back. This is where my camera will get all out of focus because I'm worried about, like, or because I'm pulling this thing so tight, my my vise will like to move on me, and then when my vise starts moving on me, my camera gets out of focus. So I'm going to try to do my best to watch and make sure that that doesn't happen as we preen all of this forward. I love this white color. Got a little bit more to go. One more wrap here. There we go. Now, I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to tie this in here and cut this off. Hey, look at that. Got artistic with it. Boom. Cutting this off. Saved myself a little bit of room at the front of that you can see. All right. So, get all that combed out. This is going to come back. Something that I just recently have started using more of. I watched one of Mickey Grant's videos, and I started using more ostrich hurl, just because it gives that really wispy, bulky perspective. And I watched one of his videos the other day, and he threw a bunch of this in one of his flies, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. So I'm just letting it fall all around the hook shank there, right toward the end, top and bottom. A couple loose wraps to just tighten it down, make sure it gets around there well enough. And all the way around. Look at that. That just gets crazy. A couple of those strands came off of there, and what I'm going to do, I think, is tie them in on one of the spots that looks a little bare on the bottom. Just like that. Boom. Alright, tying this in. Coming up. We'll finish that off. And then we're going to put an articulated shank up on the front. Basically repeat the same exact steps. And then put a head up on there. We just lost one of our lights. Alright guys, so I did just make another articulated shank right here using this same Twist Tech device. I did use the thicker wire though, and the reason why I'm using that thicker wire is obviously because this is an articulated shank. That shank was, I think, just as long, yeah, pretty much just as long as the hook shank that we used back here. But once I tie these together and I close that off with this GSP, it's going to be really, really strong. So let me come in here, cinch this together for you. You got to be a little bit careful when you get to the joints of the articulated shank because they will cut your GSP if you're not careful. I try sometimes to put some material dams in there. You know, I might tie in some dubbing or some marabou, just so that every time I go over them with my thread, I don't have to worry about it getting cut. That's just a little tip for you as well. But the wire that is tied on with this wiggle tail in the back definitely has more movement than this stuff does here. This thing's pretty stiff, so there we go. All right, to start, we're gonna go ahead and I am gonna grab more of this mountain goat. I can't believe I'm tying with mountain goat. This is a trip. On this fur too, by the way, some of this stuff is really soft. And then this looks like kind of like the base of a bucktail here, but when you get into some of the stuff that's further down on the leg, this gets a little bit more soft. It's still really long. But then the stuff that's closer to what would be the body, as this is the leg, this thing walks around this, I don't know what way. Anyways, I don't know, that was kind of weird. This, you can feel like it almost, some of these fibers almost feel like they're hollow, like bucktail. I don't know if they are. I know that, you know, some of you might be like, blasphemy, another animal has hollow hair that we didn't know about. I'm not sure, I have no idea. But I'm going to show you, like I can flare this stuff out on this shank. So I'm just going to grab a clump of material here, cut that off. I'm going to go ahead and preen out those guard hairs. Get that stuff out of there. And like I said, if I had this in front of you and I handed you this to you and I said, there's a clump of bucktail, tie that in, you wouldn't even second guess me. You'd just be like, all right, cool, that's bucktail. Couple loose wraps around there. All right, and then I can just get that to spin around a little bit more, and just gotta get it to spin a little bit better. The articulated shanks being bigger in some of these areas, you know, it's not a complete circle. It's like got two pieces of wire stacked like this. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to spin, and so I'm just taking and kind of working it back and forth across the top of that, reefing down on that wire a little bit, just getting it to spin around as much as I can. That's going to flare out just like that. Pull that tight, and you could have reverse tied this in, I suppose, if I wanted to. I'm trying to be sparing with it, so I'm not tying tons and tons of it in. I only have one leg. Only got one leg. Need another one. Got a mountain goat leg laying around. This is so random. Tying that in just like that. Getting back up here. All right, now I'm going to continue on with my dubbing brush. Tying this in. Coming all the way up here. That's where we're going to stop. Back to the front. Preen these fibers back. Tension. If you watch Gunnar Bremer's videos when he's teaching you how to wrap these dubbing brushes, he's telling you, man, just reef on them. Pull super tight, put lots of tension on, and I can't give you any better advice than that. It really is true. I regularly comb them out while I'm wrapping them, otherwise you'll get a whole bunch of wraps on there, and they won't work. It'll start to get loose on you and stuff, so tangle up. If you put a lot of wraps on without brushing it out, those fibers will get caught on, wrapped underneath themselves. So I usually don't do more than maximum 3 turns with a dubbing brush before I stop and comb it all out or pick it all out, just so that I can keep those fibers from getting trapped underneath themselves. All right, ostrich hurl. That polar flash really pops in this fly. Looks really nice. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a collar on this with some red bucktail. and then tie up the Buford head, and we're pretty much going to be done. But that is a stupid amount of bulk on that fly. It really is. It's just insane amount of bulk on that fly, and there's honestly, there's nothing to it. There's nothing there. That between that ostrich hurl and that mountain goat leg, it's crazy. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my red bucktail, get this rolling for you guys. We'll finish this up. All right, guys. Before we actually put on the other bucktail on the front for that head, I did decide that I want to do just a little bit more of some feathers, some schlopping in here, and some ostrich hurl, just to bring this a little bit closer to a finished product here. So let me just tie this in here, and then we'll be on our way. Almost there. So there's that. I'm gonna go here. Tie this in. A little bit more ostrich hurl. Trying to get to the focus right there too for you guys. I'm still somewhat new to all the camera stuff. I've been buying gear and trying to upgrade and get better at things, but it's a work in progress for me. Appreciate you guys tagging along. I'm not real good at those Buford heads either, so we're gonna see how this turns out. All right, I'm grabbing some bucktail now. Let me say this: I would totally use this mountain goat for the rest of this fly. I would use it for the rest of this fly, hands down. The only problem is it's not red. I wanted to do a red head and a red tail, and so that's what I got going on here. And this looks like a freaking mess. This thing is just one huge mad clump of feathers and fur. But I'm gonna tell you, there's no mass. It's just it's thin. I mean, this whole thing is just it looks like a lot of mass, and I really like it because it just looks so bulky. But it really isn't. It's very light, very thin. Holding this one over here, it's very similar, same length, same amount of bulk. I think I might have used a little bit more ostrich hurl in this one, but that's it. So I'm gonna take what I have left here of this red bucktail, take a decent sized chunk of it. I'm gonna make a collar here. A little bit bigger than the one that I did on the last fly. Let's see what happens here. Comb out all my guard hairs. Seems like there's some water running upstairs. Probably my little girl getting ready to take a bath before she goes to bed. Alright. So, gonna lay this in here. How far back I want it to go. I might come up just a little bit. That way I can use the front of these fibers for the beginning of my Buford head too. We're going to see if we can get this to spin. Like I said, spinning is really tough on these articulated shanks because they're big. And it's like two pieces of wire that are laying on top of each other like this. It's not round at all. It's long. So getting those shanks to getting stuff to spin on top of those shanks is pretty tough. Like I said, I'm not an expert on these Buford heads, so I think that I actually have a little bit extra hook gap, not hook gap, but distance left on my shank here than one would normally use for a Buford head. but I'm just gonna roll with it. So my colors, as I get toward the front, this red on the top of this bucktail getting darker, pretty typical. You can see the darker reds there. So that's kind of what I'm moving toward the closer I get up to the finished product here. Get the guard hairs out of here. The bigger of a clump that you have, I notice the easier it is to spin, obviously, because it's not necessarily at that point spinning on the shaft as much as it's spinning on itself, spinning around like that. See that? And before I tighten that down a ton, I'm going to push it back as much as I can. Pull it tight. Continue to push that back, work it around as much as possible. Let's see, I'm still getting a little bit of spinning there. That works very well. The bigger of a clump you have, the more it'll kind of fall around that hook shank. Just going to keep going here. I'm going to fill this out. And you know, one of the things I've thought about doing too is actually bringing this forward so far with this stuff that maybe I could actually shape it like a drunken disorderly head or something too. I've always had that, just to do a giant wedge head out of deer hair on the front of these things. I've always thought that would be really cool. So if one of you guys have done that and have a video, I would love to see it. Drop a link in the comments. I really like those wedge heads on the drunken disorderly flies. So I've toyed around with the idea of just making a huge one like this. I love the action that they have in the water when they shoot around back and forth, almost like a husky jerk or something. It's pretty impressive. So laying this down on top again, getting all those materials back as much as I can, pulling out some thread, 4 wraps on there. Spin that around, rotate it, keep pulling on it, push it back, spin it around a little bit more on my fingers here, keep pulling on it. Love it. Keep that tight. Probably do one more on the front of there. Just one more, and it probably won't be as big as those last ones were. Sorry, I'm kind of out of focus again. There we go. Kind of tricky to keep those materials back when you're finishing these heads. All the deer hair. Sometimes it's hard to do that. Pull that tight. We'll finish that up. One more. Done. All right. The only other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to shape that head, and that'll pretty much be it. It's pretty big right now. You know, I like how symmetrical it is, but that's pretty big. I don't know that I need something that huge. I mean, that's huge head for what we got going on that fly. Maybe some of you would keep it like that. I have no idea. I'm going to trim it back, though. I'll go ahead and do that now. That's what you're looking at now, right there. And to me, that looks a lot better. That's you know, pretty symmetrical. If I can turn that to you, there you go. Pretty symmetrical. But that is an extremely large profile. I mean, if I hold my hand up to this, you're gonna be able to see what you're dealing with there. Huge profile, lots of really cool undulation that you're gonna get from that ostrich hurl, and I used big fly fiber and polar flash and Flash-A-Boo for the dubbing brush. That's all I used. I used the straight big fly fiber. I used Flash-A-Boo and polar flash in the deal. That's all that dubbing brush was. Usually I use more materials than that, but that's just what I had quick on hand. So that's your fly. I think this thing is going to do awesome for some muskies and big pike this summer. The wiggle tail, I know these things are a pain in the butt to cast, but I just thought, you know what, this is going to be a sweet fly to do. That's that goat hair. I can tell you right now, guys, I will be looking for any mountain goat hair that I can find, and I think this is really what I like about it. Is what I really like about it is that when I feel it, like with my hand, like bucktail, it has the same type of coarseness that bucktail has, but it's almost like it has a little bit more bend. So down at the base, it's still really like thick, right, and feels coarse. And you can, you know, if you put it on a hook and spin it like deer hair, it'll flare out, which is awesome. But it bends a little bit more as well, and I feel like in the water it's going to move a little bit better than bucktail does. That's the thing that I don't really care for on bucktail, is that it has like it's so stiff. You know, this stuff right here is so stiff in the water. It doesn't move a lot, which some people, that's why they like it, because it holds out and it does that bulk. But this mountain goat fur, I think, has a serious place for tying. So if you guys have a chance to get some and check it out, it's specifically only the hair that grows on the back of the legs of these mountain goats. I know it sounds so random, but I saw it at the show, and I thought, man, this is super cool. So if you can ever get your hands on some, try it out. That is the wiggle tail mountain goat Buford, I guess. So it's probably not original, but you know what? It's the first time I heard about it, and I'm really glad that I found it. So there you guys go. Hope you enjoy the video. Hit subscribe. Yeah, that's a wrap.